I think most can agree that cancel culture is simply a form of bullying. The troubling part, however, is how bullying has become a socially acceptable form of punishment. If someone was murdered, I doubt many would bother to sympathize with the killer, so I totally get it. But this type of mindset is very dangerous to have when you also lack the emotional maturity to realize when you've become a part of the problem. It's this weird phenomenon where people give themselves free passes to be cruel towards another person because they've convinced themselves that that person is undeserving of being treated fairly. The perfect example of this would be the racist Karen type of videos that always go viral. It starts off with someone recording what they claim to be a racially charged incident and then sharing that video online, which results in a witch hunt to punish that person for their racism. This usually comes in the form of character assassination or losing their livelihood. So, for today's video, we'll be examining the recent case involving writer Frederick Joseph and his viral encounter with Emma Sarley, a former account executive at Bevy. The 20-second video shows a brief exchange between Frederick and Emma. I'm just gonna roll the clip so you can get the full context. Take a look.
Stay in our hood? No.
I'm gonna invite everyone.
Stay in our hood? Stay in our hood. That's what, I'm sorry, what? Stay in our hood? Stay in our hood. You just told us to stay in our hood? You just told us to leave the dog park and stay in our hood.
Oh my god, did you just say that to me? Shit.
Wow. Oh, that's funny.
Wow.
The Karenism, the white.
I'm sorry, you were right here, watch this entire thing. Did she just not stand here and tell us to stay in our hood?
She did.
You just told us to stay.
After Frederick posted this video, he continued by sharing screenshots of who he thought the woman was in this video, which was later determined to be Emma. He then contacts Emma's employer at Bevy publicly to inform them of this incident. This resulted in the CEO making a formal statement that Emma had been terminated. Surprisingly though, a lot of people saw Frederick as the aggressor in this situation, which gives me hope that a lot of people are realizing how volatile cancel culture is. But my concern came from how Frederick responded to the criticism. He uploaded both a video and a letter to justify his actions, citing that he endured emotional trauma from this experience. Huh? Let me just start off by saying that I treat racism the same way as any other form of hate speech. You're ugly, you're an idiot, it's all the same to me. Therefore, I react the same. It's a word, and some people weaponize their words to get what they want, including a reaction. So I just don't give it to them. The fact that some people respond to racism by assaulting another person is extremely alarming, because not only does this show the lack of emotional maturity to recognize when a situation is being escalated, but it also suggests that the person reacting is mentally weak, especially when others, like myself, aren't fazed by racist comments. Granted, this wasn't something that came naturally for me, and there was a time that mean comments would get under my skin. But with patience and a lot of practice, I've learned how to resist taking the emotional bait. This helped better prepare me for the obstacles of life, while complaining on Twitter would have conditioned me to be a victim. Now, I'm not saying that racism is okay, but I accept that there are certain things that are out of my control. For example, how someone feels, which is why I treat racism the same as I treat any other hateful comment. So, if we consider the video that Frederick recorded, telling someone to go back to your hood isn't racist, nor is the term specific to a certain race. Clearly, Frederick thinks it is racist, so one could say that racism is subjective, which means the punishment for the same crime will vary and isn't fair. Now, I'm not intentionally looking for a gotcha moment, but that sounds an awful lot like unfair treatment that activists claim Black people are always subjected to. And this is why I believe building emotional maturity should be the standard that society should look towards. Because if Frederick and I responded differently to the same situation, who's to blame for Frederick's emotional trauma? And in the reverse, who's responsible for my lack of emotional trauma? Trauma is something that affects us mentally, and if we considered any other mental illness, for example, depression, the general consensus is that people shouldn't use their mental health as an excuse for reacting inappropriately. So, if mental health is someone's personal responsibility, then why do people give free passes for the emotional trauma endured from racism? And please, let me be clear, I'm not talking about physical harm or threats. Racism as a word is still just a word. And if I can navigate through life without viewing these words as obstacles, why can't others? If people had the emotional maturity to pick and choose their battles more efficiently, then we'd have fewer cases of cancel culture. Now, I won't put all the blame on Frederick for ruining this woman's livelihood, because we have to consider how the public responded to this video. Even if this situation was clearly blown out of proportion, the public bears some responsibility for not asking enough questions. So, let's examine the details of this and other similar cases. The first observation is that this video started mid-altercation, so neither I nor anyone else on the internet knows what transpired prior to this video starting. And even though an eyewitness was present, there's no way of us, the people at home, knowing if he's lying. This is consistent with similar videos found online where the altercation is already in progress by the time someone hits record. Here's another observation. Race wasn't mentioned in this video, which contradicts Frederick's statement that this was a racially charged altercation. Ironically enough, in similar situations, I found that race typically isn't mentioned unless the accused racist is providing a physical description to police dispatch, as documented in cases like these. I think it's ridiculous that I have to say this, but calling the police on black people isn't racist. 911 is there when you feel like you're in danger. Sure, some people overreact, but I can certainly understand the discomfort with having a camera shoved in your face knowing that you're one tweet away from having your reputation destroyed over a misunderstanding. And any other time I hear about race, it's usually when the person recording brings it up, which makes it look like they're looking for something to be upset about. Because keep in mind, Frederick had the ability to ask Emma for clarification before pulling out his camera. Instead, he chose to publicize the interaction online. This tells me that despite Frederick's opinion that there should be consequences for racism, his actions prove that he's not really invested in ending racism as much as he's invested in bringing attention to himself. As a content creator, I can confidently tell you that bad news travels further than good news. And when you examine the result of this interaction and we compare it to similar incidents, we can see a pattern. The accused is villainized as a racist, which usually ends with them losing their job. From there, once the dust settles, there's no telling if that person is able to secure new employment because most companies will avoid hiring someone that could hurt the brand's reputation. Remember, this has a trickling effect, and we can't forget that taking away someone's livelihood also affects their family, never mind the harassment and abuse that the accused might encounter as a result of being villainized on the internet. Now, with all things considered, can we honestly say that this is the most efficient way to solve racism? By shaming, doxing, and removing someone's ability to make a living? Frederick took a small situation and made it a huge problem. The solution cannot be worse than the problem, because then it's just another problem. And when you lack the ability to recognize when your behavior is a part of the problem, that tells me that there's a certain level of emotional maturity that hasn't been achieved. As I said in the beginning, this is very important because it helps us self-reflect and become more aware of our behavior, something that Frederick clearly hasn't learned judging by these old tweets. So, if he's saying that there should be consequences for racism, then I wonder what the consequences for these tweets will look like. I don't want this to seem like I'm putting Frederick down as a person, but his behavior, which can be changed, is something that's consistent with a lot of these cancel culture cases. The accusers tend to be selective with their outrage, which then leads to an obvious display of hypocrisy. And once you realize that, you're faced with the question of why these videos make it online in the first place. If Frederick was truly upset about racism, then he wouldn't have been racist himself. I think enough time has passed to conclude that cancel culture as it currently stands simply does not solve any problems. Instead, I believe it only serves to satisfy our emotional impulses. And from an insidious standpoint, assuming I was in a position of power and I wanted to control the flow of information, cancel culture would be the perfect tool to disrupt society. Because judging by Frederick's behavior, or really any person's behavior that tries to expose a racist online, what's happening is society is normalizing vigilante justice. It's discouraging due process, it's encouraging self-censorship, and enabling emotional immaturity. All bad things. Now, before I end this video, I want to cover a related incident to highlight one more observation. A common trend that I see is that those who cancel tend to become addicted to cancel culture or become obsessed with canceling one particular person. In 2020, Frederick rented a house through Airbnb, but upon entering the property, he said he felt uncomfortable with all the satanic imagery that he claims were used for rituals. Frederick documented some of the items on his Twitter page and made sure to tag the company to pressure them into issuing him a refund. There's even one part of the thread where he claims there were satanic symbols written on the basement floor. Interestingly enough, that was the only part of the post that he didn't provide photo evidence of. So if we compare this incident to how Frederick handled the situation with Emma, same deal. Instead of asking for clarification, he went on Twitter. According to an interview with Vice, the owner of the house, whose name is Alex, said that Frederick made no attempt to contact him directly. Instead of allowing Alex the opportunity to remove what he says is a collection of eclectic art pieces, Frederick published photos of the house's interior on Twitter while accusing the homeowner of being satanic. This got so much attention that the Church of Satan actually responded to Frederick's post to clarify that these items were not really the result of satanic rituals and believe that Frederick has an overactive imagination. But honestly, I see this as a result of, once again, lacking emotional maturity. Instead of asking questions, Frederick jumped to conclusions and escalated the situation by taking his grievances to Twitter when realistically this could have all been resolved by speaking to Alex directly. Mind you, offensive art isn't covered under Airbnb's refund policy. But I also find it strange that Frederick threw a tantrum over the decor instead of realizing that he was making a choice to sleep in a stranger's home. As Alex clarified during his interview with Vice, he's actually agnostic, but if he were pagan and someone stayed in his home and did what Frederick did, it would look very intolerant to religious freedom. And to ask Airbnb to resolve this issue would mean that they would have to cherry pick which theologies they find acceptable, which is discrimination. In my opinion, it looks like Frederick just wasn't happy with the rental and needed an excuse to finesse a refund. Because otherwise, I don't understand why he didn't just take these items and shove them in a box until he was finished with his stay. Or, I don't know, speak to the owner directly and let him put the items in a box. But once again, if we compare this incident to what happened with Emma, we notice another pattern. Frederick brought race into the equation by stating that his family vacated the premises because Black people shouldn't have to deal with something that makes them feel unsafe. Granted, no one should be forced to be in an unsafe situation, but turning this into a race issue just enables others to victimize themselves instead of building emotional maturity and being reasonable with how we live with our traumas. Like this person that feels like being in a house in the middle of nowhere is potentially dangerous to Black people. When I saw this comment, I couldn't help but laugh because I want my dream home to be out in the middle of nowhere. But potentially dangerous? I can say that about anything. Danger is around every corner, but there's no scientific backing to suggest that Black people exclusively fear strange houses in the middle of nowhere. And in my opinion, the real danger is believing that skin color can determine someone's quality of life, including their fears. If you are afraid of something, that's cool. But we shouldn't weaponize these individual fears to make them race specific because that's not taking ownership for one's own mental well-being. If certain Black folks, for example, are afraid of the police, okay, but I'm personally not. Therefore, I reject the generalization that Black people fear the police. Remember, our traumas are our own responsibility, and refusing to take responsibility for our own traumas will just condition people to be victims. Of course, these are just my thoughts and I'd love to know yours, so let me know in the comments, what do you think? And also, if you have a suggestion for a future topic, let me know down below. My name is Gothix, this is Right Now, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!